Hi, you are listening to Status Stranded Ink Rain by David Halen. I hope you enjoy. First stop, Vartai, a sanctuary planet in an adjacent galaxy to our own Milky Way. Bright blue sun, abundant oceans, lush red foliage, beautiful wildlife. Sounds like a nice place to be. Elsa, a jet-black wolf with hazel eyes, says that Vartai is a vast local amnesty. You will see alien races here that have had vendettas and disagreements for a long time. When she says a long time, I get the implication of hundreds or a few thousand years. The sight of space travel is stunning in its own way. You could look out the windows and you would see light trails sluggishly soaring past us as we fly through the expanse. The stars are streaks of mostly white light, and the different nebulous clouds range in color from red to gold to blue to green to almost every color. Rain, I was informed by Elsa. A distress call has been sent out. I walked over to where she was standing. Where? Elsa had a tablet that she used to control the display on the screens. The words and numerical figures looked strange, but I was able to read them like they were the Greek letters and Arabic numbers that I grew up with, because they vaguely looked like what I was familiar with. It must be something to do with the wolves and their normal communication, and how it is translated into their technology. F-54.3, Elsa told me. A world you left behind. Elsa almost had the tone of voice like an oracle when she communicated. My eyes narrowed. Who could possibly? There's visual account. Elsa interrupted me as she tapped her tablet a few times, making the screens change in response. After a few seconds, a video feed came up. Surprisingly, there's still some amount of receiving lag in space. The figure on the other side of the feed was shaped like a bowling pin with arms and legs built like trees of old. He had a coarse, scale-covered gray flesh with sky-blue markings that could be comparable to veins. His head looked like the head of a bull, but with the curled goat horns. His head and face with all the same scale texture and design. His eyes were full with the color blue. His hands were like humans' hands, if not for the scales. And he was wearing a black open jacket with white pants. This individual looked exceedingly distressed. He was in the middle of some desert on Earth. I could tell by the towering sand dunes. And there was a spaceship with no lights on behind him. It was nighttime where he was right now, and there were bright glistenings of light cast onto the landscape around him. The figure started talking frantically in a language I could understand, but the movement of his mouth and the words I heard didn't line up. More of the Soto tech at play. Hello, I am Hisoka, from the Yoyaku-zumi race. His breaths were shaking, and he was moving frantically. I don't know if there's anyone out there who can hear me, but... He looked up and froze before fighting himself quietly. No, keep it together, keep it together. Hisoka took another shaking deep breath. My ship has stalled on takeoff. After I was done doing some tests. Normally I'm fine. His face started to cringe, and some green equivalent of tears started streaming down his face. I looked over at Elsa. What could cause this man so much stress? Elsa shook her head. I am uncertain. There are no local reports due to little to no traffic in the area. My eyebrows furrowed at the sound of that. The alien on the screen collected himself better before finally saying one word. Milzina. Elsa's eyes widened as she looked at the screen with the distressed alien on it. This one says Milzina? A look of shock and horror came upon her face at what she had said. Hisoka turned his camera and pointed it to the sky. At first, the moon and waning gibbous was causing a massive glare on the camera, but then the camera adjusted itself, and we could see what was causing much distress to this man. There was something in the sky. It was a strange-looking ship. This ship was nothing like I had ever seen before, but then again, I had only been in space the equivalent of a week. This ship dominated 1/5 of the night sky. It reminded me of a fractal, or a snowflake, made out of highly reflective gold. The light that reflected off the gold seemed to refract like incomplete pieces of a rainbow, creating few interesting colored glares on the camera lens. At its center were 3 support beams that were met together to divide the open space between them into perfect thirds. From these 3 main beams, different straight branches of different sizes protruded in perfect trisymmetry, like a snowflake, and as the different beams of the fractal grew smaller and smaller in size, they made a shape like that of a hexagon in overall shape. This was the fabled Milzina ship, and it was in the atmosphere of Earth as we watched the distress call. The Milzina ship was moving slowly across the sky as the distressed alien was whimpering and stuttering. Then chills went up my spine as the Milzina ship passed behind the moon. This thing wasn't inside the atmosphere. This thing was behind the moon, and it's far larger than what I had thought before. My jaw dropped in amazement and terror at what I had just seen, and I haven't seen the reason to fear it yet. The ship stopped moving, and the moon was covering a minuscule part of the top third of the ship. Hisoka shuddered, and his shuddering translated to the camera movements as he kept it aimed at the celestial-sized ship. Please, go away. Please, please, please go away. The sound of his sobbing was hard to listen to because of how distressed he was. Someone help! Please, help! He stopped speaking as a small dot of light flashed on a part of the massive ship. The daunting idea that this small light on the Milzina ship is most likely the size of a small city made my heart sink. A second or two later, that light returned, but it was traveling from the Milzina ship down towards Earth. No! Hisoka screamed as he continued sobbing. No! Allie approached my side with a greatly perturbed look in her eye. I put my arm around her and held her close to my chest. Is there anything we can do? I asked Elsa, for the sake of Allie. Elsa lowered her head in sorrow. My apologies, sweet leadership. Nothing can be done. Allie sniffled and she started to shake and tremble more and more with each pulse of the alien's frantic sobbing. I grimaced at everything. Elsa, mute the audio. The sounds of the sobbing alien were cut short by the muting, but his trembling hand still shook the camera as we watched the glow of light descend to the earth. As the seconds passed, the light disappeared over the horizon. A rift or portal of sorts opened up above the Milzina ship, and the ship passed through the portal quickly, like a bird flying in the air. Then the portal was gone, and the moon was the only light in the night sky. It then looked like the ground shook intensively and violently before the camera was cut. My face was fixed in an expression of shock, and Allie was sobbing quietly against my chest. Elsa turned towards Allie and I, her wolf face in a sad expression. My sincerest condolences, sweet leadership. I looked around, and my group was looking at the blank screen with shocked and aghast looks on their faces, some of their lips quivering as if they were about to burst out into tears, some already with tears streaming down their faces. Kennocha and Vernon were holding each other as Mallory held both of them, and Csaba was crying because other people were. There were a few certain people that had an especially pissed look on their faces. Titos, Marid, Anton, Evelina, and Linda were the pissed expressions that I saw. Some of my group were starting to look my way. I realized I had to say something to provide any amount of comfort to them. After a second of thought, I spoke. Rest assured, friends, there will be another world for us. A few of them nodded in some emotion. Hope, agreement, satisfaction, or in response in general. But Marid, standing in the back of the crowd, flipped me the bird with a glower on his face. Someone ran for one of the restrooms as I nudged Allie, saying, "Have Slanie accompany you to our room. I need to talk with Marid." She nodded and collected Slanie from our crowd. She was wearing a thin white doctor's coat over her normal outfit of breastplate and skirt. I then accosted Marid. "You and I, room 3, now." Marid rolled his eyes and started walking ahead of me to the room. "Anton, if you would please join us," I asked the tallest, largest man under my leadership. Anton nodded, and ahead of me, Marid is startled at what I had said. Anton was about an inch taller than I was. He was built with a large amount of fat and muscle. He could break someone's arm with his bare hands. He was mildly pale and had his head shaved, and when he was pissed, his dark brown eyes bored deep holes into your soul. Anton walked at my side as we followed Marid into room 3. I picked room 3 because it was the children's room, and I know that the children didn't have weapons that Marid could utilize if he decides to do more than just talk. Anton and I entered the room, and Anton stood in front of the closed door behind me over my shoulder. Marid shrugged. "What the fuck do you want?" he asked lackadaisical. "Why do you continue to challenge my authority, even when I'm not giving orders?" I asked flatly. "You ain't doing shit about it," Marid said with a sharper tone to his voice. "I am now." "Then fucking do something." I strode toward with a certain determination and presence up to Marid until I was not even inches away from his face. "I tell you to only attack when you're attacked, but you attack anyways. You directly disobeyed my command." Marid backed up a step, but I stepped forward, keeping the same distance. He still had a glower on his expression. "Numerous times, you actively disregarded the housekeeper's no swearing around children rule, with the consequence to follow, but you decide not to learn." Marid backed up even more, but I kept my close distance as I accosted him. "Because fuck you," Marid spat the words out. I crossed my fingers behind my back, making sure Anton was able to see. "Why?" "Because you don't give me any fucking respect, shithead." "I would give you some if you gave me a reason to." Anton grabbed Marid by both of the arms from behind and held them behind Marid. "Fuck, man, I give you every reason to respect me." "Give me one thing you have done to earn my respect." The words growled in my throat. "I am confident. Benigno Dean showed the same confidence. I'm a strong fighter, and you use that talent to fight against my leadership." Marid pondered for a moment. "I look good?" "Is this a fucking joke to you?" I roared at him. "Why does it matter? Everyone outside of this room mourns and is troubled by what they had just seen. Half of us cried. Hell, someone ran to the bathroom to throw up because of the stress it caused them. What the fuck does that have to do with anything? Do you care? Fuck no. Then what does that say about you? I don't let petty shit get to me. Petty shit. I was disgusted at that. The end of the world isn't fucking petty shit, Marid. Why the hell is everyone making big shit about it? We weren't ever going back there anyways. Because that's where you were fucking born. I stretched the words for emphasis. Even Slanie and Mallory care about Earth more than you. Marad rolled his eyes and looked elsewhere in the room. I grabbed his head and made sure he was looking me straight in the eyes. Listen here, Marad. You're on thin fucking ice. You have been for a long time, I explained to him. This is verbal retaliation for everything verbal you have done. But if you do one thing out of line physically, you will get physical retaliation once. Marad scoffed. Why don't you fucking kill me right now? Have Anton break my neck and throw me in the trash. Because unlike Dean, I have some amount of hope mixed with this salt. Marad growled a short bit. Do you understand? His eyebrows were furrowed together, but nonetheless, he nodded. I backed up, and Anton let go of Marad, causing him to lose his balance for a few seconds as Anton and I walked out of the room. Anton joined the rest of the group and chose someone to comfort, and I went to my room where Allie and Slanie were. I knocked on the door and waited for a response. Slanie quickly answered, Indecent. I waited patiently outside. I closed my eyes and slowly shook my head. It's really gone. Nothing to come back to. Only forward. I sighed as Slanie opened the door for me. Allie was putting on a button-up coat over the bra she had on. How is she, Doc? Slanie shrugged. Good news. Nothing old and nothing new. Appears to be more stress expressed than that of everyone else, composed in their own way. I nodded. Help out whoever needs it upstairs, I instructed. Yes, sir. I also want medical exams of each human on board this ship to be conducted every 2 days, starting today, and after each time we visit another planet. She nodded as she again said, Yes, sir. She then left the room and went upstairs. Allie was sitting at the foot of her bed on the left side of her room. She didn't bother buttoning up the dark blue-colored coat, revealing a small chub of stomach underneath her bra-fixed breasts. She had a downcast look about herself as she looked over at me with tears in her eyes. I sat down next to her, with more of myself on the bed. I was facing the large window that her bed was facing. Without getting off the bed, she rolled herself while sitting up to my front, to where she was also looking out the window. I put my arms around her while holding the fronts of her coat over her like I was bundling her up in a blanket. She let herself be small in my hold and rested her head on the inside of my shoulder. I kissed the top of her head and moved my hand to her cheek, holding her head gently to my chest. It's gone. It's really gone. Her voice barely made it above a quiver. I held her tighter. What is there to say? How do we move on from this? Yeah, we've anticipated this for decades, but it actually happened today. The world was destroyed by an incomparable force. Is revenge worth it? Can revenge even be achieved against the Milzina? Or is revenge better obtained against the world leaders who left us behind? Then we finally leave, and not even a week later, the world ends. That's cutting it pretty fucking close. Right? Allie's heartbroken voice caught me off guard like a gunshot to the neck. I think I'm done for the day. Today was a lot. I nodded. Yeah. My own voice was cracking. It was. You two need more time? Slanie asked from behind us. I turned my head, and she was leaning against the door frame with the glowing tablets rested on her hip. You two have been there for about an hour. My eyebrows raised at that information. I sighed before I asked, How are you taking the end of the world? Slanie sighed. I'll have Linnell to talk to tonight about that, but it isn't too good, and I'm trying my hardest to keep it together. I glanced down at Allie, who was asleep on my chest now. I woke her up before speaking again. Knowing how you are, if it's that hard, you must be very troubled. She nodded. More than anything else in my life. She shook her head. Not even the moon evacuation felt this bad. I guess It felt normal coming back to Earth. She took a shaking breath. But now there's no Earth to come home to. I could feel Allie tense at that. Slanie wiped her face with a hand in grief. I'm sorry, Allie. Everyone's hurt by this, and it feels like walking on nails to say anything. Allie made a soft noise of sad confirmation. She understands, I told her. Slanie nodded. Allie got in a position to talk. She sat up and I put my arms around her stomach. Have you been doing anything in the meantime to distract you? Slanie smirked. I had the kids follow me and I told them stories. I wish I could have slept like you. Allie shook her head. It was a nightmare. Oh, I'm sorry. Allie slowly nodded, but then shook her head to shake some of the thoughts out. Could you tell us one of the stories? Slanie sighed and looked with her eyes to her left. Okay. She took another minute to compose herself before telling us the story. This is the story of the butterfly and the hornet. The butterfly was flying around with his family, having a wonderful time during this beautiful day. Then suddenly, a lone hornet comes and kills a large number of the butterfly's family, leaving our butterfly all alone and angry. The butterfly then hated the hornet and swore to bring vengeance and to kill the hornet. But the hornet was part of a larger hornet's nest. So the butterfly killed one hornet, but it wasn't the right hornet. Same with the next hornet, and the next, and all of them before she came across the last hornet. The hornet that killed his family. The butterfly was about to kill the hornet before the hornet speaks up. I understand your anger, because I, too, used to be angry. All of it was useless anger that I couldn't keep to myself. It would be nice to have a second chance, but I will understand if you refuse to give me one. Slanie stopped. I spoke up. Does he kill the hornet? She shrugged. I don't know. If he does, every other hornet that isn't related to the original is going to attack the butterfly and he'll die. But if he doesn't, it's possible that the hornet kills the butterfly anyways. She shook her head. I don't know. There has to be some other way it can end. I shrugged my shoulders. What are the reports of the medical exams? I asked. Slanie nodded her hand. Yeah, that was interesting, she commented. Everyone has higher blood pressure for obvious reasons. Hopefully the stop at Vartai helps against that. Linda isn't succumbing to her older age yet, which is amazing. And the pause hung in the air longer than I thought it would. What? Bridget is pregnant. Allie looked at Slanie. Really? She nodded. Almost 2 months. The energy coming off of Allie felt a little better than before, but it was still tainted by the end of the world. I think I know who the father is. Slanie scoffed. Obviously. The radio in my pocket toned. Boss, we are approximately 20 minutes away from Vartai. I took the radio out and spoke into it. Thank you. We'll get ready. I looked over at Slanie and she nodded as she went out of the room. Allie and I stood up and the coat she was wearing dropped to her elbows. She looked down at herself before looking up at me with a certain look of playfulness that was corroded by the end of the world. I think I'll put some real clothes on. I nodded. That would be good. Hi, this is David Halen, and you just finished listening to Chapter Ink Rain from my story, Status Stranded. I hope you enjoyed. See you next week.